Good day, everybody. In this video, we will be installing Virtual Smart Zone, Dataplane, and vRIoT on rXg, leveraging the built-in virtualization technology. The machine I'm working with today has 32 cores, 48 gigs of RAM, and 448 gigabyte SSD. Now keep in mind, this deployment is simply to demonstrate the capability in a lab environment. In production, you'll probably need a bit more power depending on the scale of the deployment. Be sure and check the documentation on the Ruckus website for the minimum requirements for these platforms. Let's go ahead and get started by loading the OVAs. So I'm going to go ahead and go to Services and Virtualization. And here, the first thing that we need to do is create the virtualization host. So I'm going to do that. Just going to leave all the defaults, rxg.local. Go ahead and hit create. And that'll go ahead and build out my vSwitches for me. And then everything else will still be empty. So the next thing that I need to do is we have this disk images scaffold here. So I need to load some disk images in here. So I'm going to go ahead and click on disk images, and I'm going to create new. And I don't need to put a file name in because I'm going to upload a file, and that file is going to be located under here. And so we'll load SmartZone first. And we'll hit create. All right, that file is now loaded. So we're going to go ahead and load the Dataplane next. So choose File, VDP, Open, and Create. All right, so now that those two files are complete, the third file, which is going to be vRIoT, we have to do a little bit differently due to the size of the file. It's about an 8 gig file, and if we tried to upload it through the web browser would time out. So what I'm going to do is use SCP to upload that to the rXg. So I'm going to go ahead and just open a default browser here. And we're going to change directory to the folder that contains the vRIoT software. I do see that in there. And so now I have the SCP command saved. That looks good. And so what this is saying is source file, vRIoT 2.0.1.0.64 is going to be copied to lab 1-3, which is this system here, into the space admins TCB, which is my admin directory, and the same file name. So we're going to go ahead and press enter there. Okay, we'll let that copy over, and then we'll continue once that's done. All right, that file is uploaded, and now the next thing that we need to do is we need to move that file into the directory so that it shows up in this list. So let's go ahead and SSH into the system. This is going to be lab 1-3. I'm going to elevate to super user by copying this first block of letters as the password. And now we're in. And so we want to be in the my admin directory, which is space admins TCP. I'll do an ls. I see the file there, and we want to move that to vRIoT to / space disk images. Okay, and then if I do an ls, it's no longer there because it's been moved to the new location. So minimize that. Just refresh the page here. And then if I look at disk images, now I see that I have vRIoT, VDP, and vSCG all available for installation. All right, so the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to go down and build the virtual machines. So I'm going to create new under virtual machine, and we're going to do the smart zone first. So I'll do VSC here. And host is going to be rXg.local, which means this host. If it was a member of a cluster, then I could potentially install this on a different node of the cluster. If this was going to be another rXg for cluster configuration, I could do some configuration here that automatically pulls in that cluster configuration, but I'm not in this case. So the bootloader, we're going to change that to UEFI-CSM. So for all three of the products that we're installing, the SmartZone-Dataplane and vRIoT, we're going to use UEFI-CSM. And the Smart Zone, I like to put a minimum of 16 gigs of RAM, and I'll do 8 cores. And for virtual interfaces, the Smart Zone only needs one virtual interface, so I'm just going to call it VSC. The virtual switch will be VMX3. So these correspond to the interfaces on the rXg. And so by default on the rXg, VMX0, or the lowest number interface, is going to be my WAN. And VMX3, the highest number interface, is going to be my LAN, and it has a DHCP server on it. And in just a minute, we're going to do some cool stuff with DHCP that actually makes this process a little bit easier as well. So I'm going to go ahead and do VMX3. And then for the disk, we're going to change this to SmartZone. Now you can give it a unique name if you want to, or it will take the name of the OVA file here. So in this case, I don't really care what the name of the disk image is, so I'm just going to let it take the name of the OVA file. Okay, and I don't need to do anything with Cloud Init. So just going to double check. And everything looks good there, so I'm going to go ahead and hit create. And so now it'll go through and it'll expand that OVA, create the disk image, and once everything's ready, then it'll show the VM in a stopped state. Okay, we're still waiting for that one to finish up, so I'm going to go ahead and go to start working on the VDP. So we're going to do virtual data plane here. And you'll notice that it keeps all the same settings from the previous configuration. I do want to knock the RAM down just a little bit. And keep in mind, this is a lab environment, so I am deploying these with the very minimal specifications. In a production environment, you'll want to go by the documentation based on the number of users you plan to support and how big of a deployment you plan to create. But in the case of this lab environment, I'm just going to do the bare minimum. And so we're going to change the name of the interface to VDP. And data planes require 2 interfaces, so we're going to call this VDP1. And then we'll take this one and call it VDP2. Put that on my LAN as well. And here we're going to create a VDP. We'll take this information out. And that's all we need to do for that one. And so we see VSC is in the stopped state. VDP is ready to go. And then the last one we're going to do here is vRIoT. We're going to keep the same specifications here. And on vRIoT, we're back to only needing one interface. So I'll delete that extra one. Change that to vRIoT. Delete this information out. Okay, and we'll hit create. All right, so we have 2 of the machines built. We're just going to double check a couple of things here. So our drives are being built, vRIoT still being created. And in the meantime, what I'm going to start doing is we have the MAC addresses for the systems. And so I'm going to create DHCP reservations for these systems so that I can just use the DHCP option to provision them. So we're going to do copy on the MAC address, and then I'm going to duplicate this tab. And I usually find it easier just to kind of split the screen and have two different instances going here. And so on this right side, we'll go to Services and DHCP. And under Fixed Host, we're going to add VSC here. The IP is going to be 192.168.5.5. Now notice that this IP address is out of the scope of my DHCP pools. So the fixed host should be outside of that particular scope. So I'll put the MAC address in for the VSC, and the host name I want is going to be lab1 VSC. And then we'll go ahead and hit create on that one. And then if I go down and look, now we have VDP1 here. And then we'll go to create new. This will be VDP. IP on this will be 192.168.5.6. MAC. Oops. And host name will be lab1 VDP. And then we'll go ahead and hit create. And then we're going to go ahead and do the last one, which is going to be vRIoT. IP 192.168.5.8. Because VDP takes two IP addresses, 6 and 7. One of them we're going to do statically, just so you can kind of see that process as well. So I did one DHCP and one static. MAC, we'll copy from here for vRIoT. Maybe. There we go. And host name will be lab1 vRIoT. And we'll go ahead and hit create here. All right, so now we have all of our DHCP fixed hosts in place. And so as I bring these systems up and set them for DHCP, they will pull down these IP addresses from the rXg. And so let's see how we're doing back on our virtualization tab. We can go ahead and close this. And I'm going to replace that with an SSH session. We'll get to that in just a second here. All right, so all of my virtual machines have been built, and I have drives and interfaces for all of them. Let's go ahead and hit refresh there. So that took up 20 gigs. We have all the interfaces. Okay, and so what we're going to do now is we're going to start VSZ. So I'm going to go ahead and hit start. We don't have to do an install or anything when we use the OVA files because it already has a disk image created. So in this case, I just need to hit start. We'll go ahead and go over here. And I've SSH'd into the rXg, so the next thing I need to do is elevate to superuser. And you do that by typing issue. First, I need to type issue so that I can get the IUI information. And then we're going to type su space minus. And it prompts you for a password. And the password here is going to be this first block of alpha letters. So I'm going to copy that and then paste that down here. And then in order to interact with the virtualization of the rXg, all the commands will start with VM. And for example, I could do VM list and see that all the VMs are created here. And I have one running, which is going to be the smart zone. And if I want to see the console of the smart zone, then I can just do VM console VSC. It says connected. I press enter one more time, and now I'm at the console of the VSC. So let me go ahead and log in here. So it brought in the host name, the lab1 VSC. And so I'm going to do admin, enable, admin, and then we'll do setup, essentials, yes, IPv4, 2 for DHCP. DNS server is going to be the rXg, which by default is 192.168.5.1. Secondary will be something not rXg, so 8.8.8.8. Yes, I want to create that. And this step takes a minute. And once it comes back, it's going to ask me to confirm one more time. And we will. Yes. Then I'm going to do a ping, 8.8.8.8. And notice it did pull down the IP address that I told it to, which is the 5.5. Pings are looking good. So at this point, I can do tilde, tilde, period. So tilde, tilde, period. And that will exit me out of that console session. I'll just do clear. And now I'm on to the next one. And if I wanted to, I could go ahead and do start the VDP from command line. So if I wanted to do VM start VDP, I could do that. And then do VM console VDP. And so there I can see the system booting up. And I see over on the GUI side. So it's your preference. Sometimes for me, it's more tedious to take my hands off the keyboard when I'm already in a console to go over and click start. So you can do it from either side. And so now the VSE is booted up. So we're going to go ahead and do admin, admin, enable, admin, setup. Okay, and so now it's telling me that I've logged in faster than it's ready for me to, so I need to wait for the network connectivity to come up. So we're going to pause here and wait for that to come up, and then we'll resume the configuration. Okay, now it's asking me, do I want to modify the host name? And again, it brought down the host name that I created within the rXg. So I'm going to say, no, I don't want to modify the host name. IPv4. And for this first interface, we're going to set it to DHCP. Do you want to apply this network configuration? Yes. And for the second one, we'll do a manual address. IP address is going to be 192.168.5.7. DNS server. Secondary. So the data interface external NAT IP. So this system is going to be behind NAT because I'm giving it private IP addresses behind the rXg. And so I need to know if I go to, I typically do duplicate here just if I'm working on the screen. So I can go look at something else. So I'm going to go network and WAN. And then the IP address of this box is here. So I can just copy that maybe. We'll go ahead and do a paste. The port is 23233, that's okay. You want to upload the certificate? No, not right now. No, I don't want to use DHCP option. Please input VSE control address. We did that in the previous step, so that was the 192.168.5.5. And if I want to, I can go over to services, DHCP, and I see that VSZ is 5.5 here. Yes, I want my data plane to connect to 5.5. And it wants passwords. All right. So I'm just going to do a quick ping test to make sure that I have internet access, which I do. That's great. And so we're done with data plane. So data plane is installed and online, and it's actually looking for the SmartZone. So once I finish the configuration of the SmartZone, that'll be ready to go. I'm going to do my tilde tilde period. Sometimes I have to do it a couple of times to get out of it, but once I get back to the rxg command, I can do a clear. Don't have to, this is just my preference. And then I do VM list again, VM console. Actually, we need to start vRIoT, so we're going to do VM start vRIoT, VM console vRIoT. Okay, looks like it's ready to go. So we will do admin. Okay, now that we're logged into the VDP, we'll do a couple of things. I'm going to press 1 for Ethernet network. I see that it pulled down the IP address that I told it. And then we'll hit X for exit. And then the other thing I want to do is enable NTP. So I'm going to go to NTP settings, 1 enable. And I could set this to an external server or to the rXg. In this case, I'm going to set it to the rXg. And there we go. So that's all set. There's a few other commands there, but I don't need any of those at this time. So we're going to go ahead and hit log off and do my tilde period to get back to rXg, clear. And so now we have all 3 VMs. Let me see if I can ping them all. So we're going to do 192.168.5.5, yes. 5.6, yes. 5.7, yes. And 5.8, yes. So I can get to all of the different machines that we've built. Now the other thing is because this is a lab environment, I don't have anything on the LAN side of this rXg. So I'm going to do a couple of cool things to get through the rXg to these systems, because the SmartZone and vRIoT do require some additional steps from the GUI. So what we're going to do is we're going to bounce over here to System and Portals. And under System and Portals, I'm going to use HTTP proxy or HTTP virtual host and create, so basically a pass-through for each of these systems. And the cool part about this is, so I've already created a DNS record for this, so it's going to be lab 1-3, and we're going to call this VSZ, which is already here in my cache. And the server IP is going to be 192.168.5.5. Listening port will be 8443. It'll be HTTPS. And for the certificate, I have a wildcard certificate loaded on the system. So I'll be able to use that to access this SmartZone without even putting a certificate on the SmartZone. So from connections coming from the internet to the rXg, that connection will be secured, even though I'm using this domain with the certificate that is installed, the wildcard certificate that's installed on this machine. And so then I do a proxy. And so the other cool part about this is that I don't have to open port 8443 in the firewall, so it can't be detected by scanning. Somebody would have to have specifically this domain name to be able to determine that it's actually open, because it's basically proxying through 443 on the WAN interface here. So I have that created. So that is not for VDP, this will be for VSZ. And then I'll hit create. And then I should be able to go to https://lab1-3 vsz.rxg.ninja. And there I am at the very first startup. So we're going to do one more for vRIoT. VDP doesn't have a GUI that you can interact with, that I'm aware of anyway. We did all the configuration that we needed to do through the command line. So I'm going to do one for vRIoT. So we'll do vRIoT here. Hostname will be lab1 vRIoT. IP is 192.168.5.8. And this one uses 443 local server. The other thing to notice, since I said that, is typically this uses 8443, but since I told it to use 443 on the outside and 8443 on the inside, I put in that port number here, then I just have to do normal 443 request to that domain. Okay, so that looks good. I'll hit create. Okay, now that that entry's in, let's jump over and see if I can get to vRIoT. So we're going to do lab 1-3 vRIoT. Yep, and there's vRIoT. So that'll take a minute to come up. We have SmartZone accessible. We'd go through the normal configuration here. We've demonstrated ping connectivity on the back end. We have a lot of other videos that show, like the MDU video that will show, how you can actually add SmartZone under network and wireless. And so we can do a configuration sync here with SmartZone and completely configure everything WLAN related through the rXg GUI instead of having to log into the SmartZone GUI. So a lot of cool stuff going on there, but the main purpose of this video is I just wanted to show you how you could load virtual SmartZone, VDP, and vRIoT all as virtual machines within the rXg, leveraging the virtualization technology that's built in. All right, guys, well, I hope you found this information helpful, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Have a good one.